You were supposed to be here 30 minutes ago. What are you doing? Go, go. 30 seconds to start. Starting in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Good evening, friends. Today is October 31st, 1938, and you're listening to the Eagle Radio Hour. Tonight's special program is brought to you by Master Scar Sellers Taekwondo and the Cremation Center of Birmingham. Our show is directed by Amy Strickland and Veronica Kloss, and it is scored by Emily Jensen. We bring you classic tales of terror and suspense adapted from the great writers of this century. This program may be too frightening for young listeners. There is no cussing, drinking, smoking, or anything blue in nature, but this is a tale of cosmic horror, dealing with the primal fear that comes from the unknown and questions of superstition, fanaticism, and the supernatural. And so, without further ado, we begin. WMTN and the Eagle Radio Hour present HP Lovecraft's classic tale of terror, The Call of Cthulhu.
The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance, in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage too far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. Theosophists have guessed at the awesome grandeur of the cosmic cycle, wherein our world and human race form transient incidents. They have hinted at strange survivals in terms which would freeze the blood if not masked by bland optimism. But it is not from them that there came the single glimpse of forbidden aeons which chills me when I think of it and maddens me when I dream of it. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flashed out from an accidental piecing together of separated things. In this case, an old newspaper item and the notes of a dead professor. I certainly hope that no one else will accomplish this piecing out. If I live, I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a chain. I think that the professor, too, intended to keep silent regarding the part he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had not sudden death seized him.
Well, that should settle it for you, Captain. Not murder, not a voodoo hex.
No?
There was a large abscess on his heart. Death certificate will read cardiac insufficiency.
And the shove by the sailor. Could he have caused this episode?
Perhaps, but Professor Angel was 92 with a massive lesion on his heart. That train had already left the station. If not for that sailor, it would have been a cart coming too near or a clap of thunder.
Good. Well, not good for Professor Angel, but good I don't have to spend my night rounding up sailors to find our man.
No, definitely not good for Professor Angel.
I'm afraid the professor wasn't the tidiest of record keepers. I did my best to pick up after him, dusting and cleaning up his cups and all, but his papers were always off limits.
I don't ever remember the study being so unkempt.
Yes, it really did deteriorate these past few months. It's a shame. Of course, it's never unexpected at 92, but it was still a shock. Young sailor who bowled him over didn't even stop, they said. Went straight up that seedy alley and didn't stop to help.
I'm not sure what he could have done for him.
Yes, well, still wasn't right. No, you call if you need anything, Charlotte, dear. I'm paid through the end of the week.
Oh, what a beautiful box. Locked. Well, there must be a key here somewhere. As my grand-uncle's heir and executor, I was expected to go over his papers, and so I had many of the files moved to my quarters in Boston. Much of the material which I correlated would later be published by the American Archaeological Society. But there was one box which I found exceedingly puzzling, and which I felt much averse from showing to other eyes. It had been locked, and I did not find a key until it occurred to me to examine the personal ring which the professor always carried. It was among his effects that had been returned to Mrs. Crowe by the coroner following the investigation. I succeeded at opening it, but when I did so, seemed only to be puzzled for what could be the meaning of the strange clay bas-relief and the disjointed jottings, ramblings, and cuttings which I found. The writing accompanying this oddity was in Professor Angel's most recent hand, and made no pretense of literary style as it recounted the trail my great-uncle had followed.
Professor Angel, thank you for meeting with me.
Please come in, Andrew. How are your mother and father?
Well, thank you.
How is school? The Rhode Island School of Design is a fine institution. I have a colleague there in the art history department. Have you taken any courses with Professor Zoxes?
No, I have not.
Would you like a cup of coffee? I can have Miss Crowe brew a pot.
Yes, please. I did not sleep much last night. Or rather, I did not sleep well.
Nightmares? You used to recount the most imaginative dreams when you were a boy. Do you remember them? Your mother told everyone who would listen that you had a poet's soul, exploring entire worlds in your sleep.
Yes, I remember. I sailed between cities, born of the minds of slumbering genius. I could not wait to sleep back then.
If you will, coffee for my guest.
How do you take it, Mr. Wilcox?
Black. Professor, I was hoping you could help me decipher some strange hieroglyphics. I know it has been years, but you're the only person I know who might be able to read them.
Hieroglyphics? Egyptian?
No. Other.
I dare say this tablet bears little kinship to archaeology, my boy. Why, it's quite new.
It is new, indeed, for I made it last night in a dream of strange cities, and dreams are older than brooding Tyre, or the contemplative Sphinx, or garden-girdled Babylon.
In a dream, you say? You produced this in your sleep?
The tremors last night, the earthquake.
Yes, quite unusual for these parts, but not unheard of.
The tremors were on my mind as I slept, and in my dreams, I was transported to a loci I've never seen before. You must understand that the dreams of my childhood were no typical dreams of shifting narratives and familiar strangers. In these dreams, I was lucid, able to feel the ground beneath my feet as I navigated consistent worlds. And in this dream last night, I had arrived at a place that felt just as real, but that I could not place in my familiar land of dreams. I visited a great cyclopean city with titanic blocks and sky-flung monoliths that dripped with green ooze and radiated latent horror. The pillars and walls were covered with these symbols. And from below, I felt a voice, almost a sensation. But a sound is too imprecise, for I heard it like one might hear a color or smell light.
A voice? What did it say?
No words that our tongues could pronounce. The best I can manage.
Cthulhu Fatan.
And then I awoke, still in my nightclothes, drenched in cold sweat, hunched over this completed carving.
Of course. My memory is not what it used to be, but yes, these hieroglyphics, of course.
You can place it?
Alongside this icon, the bat-like wings, the strong humanoid form, the claws, the massive tentacles that hang below its upper jaw instead of a mouth. How could my mind be so porous?
What does it mean?
Where did you learn it, this boy?
I'm sorry?
Who taught you those words, this figure?
No one. I just woke with
Have
tools
you
in my
been
hands.
inducted into any secret societies?
No.
Cults, if you have, as an academic, I swear my absolute
No.
silence in this matter.
Professor.
And you've never heard anyone utter this phrase, Cthulhu.
On my life. Professor Angel, what is it?
I'm not sure, Andrew. You must tell me if you have another of these dreams.
This bore regular fruit, for after the first interview, the manuscript records daily calls of the young man, during which he related startling fragments of nocturnal imagery, whose burden was always some terrible cyclopean vista of dark and dripping stone.
And then I hear it, the sound. Not a voice, but an intelligence, chanting monotonous tones. It's a warning.
The presser tried to record the sounds, but the phrases were uninscribable, save his gibberish.
I know I'm not supposed to be there. He's going to wake up. He's going to find me.
The language was never meant for human tongues, but two sounds always repeated.
Always the chanting. Always. The voice. Not a voice.
Cthulhu and Raleigh.
He saw me.
On March 23rd, Wilcox failed to appear, and inquiries at his quarters revealed that he had been stricken with an obscure sort of fever and taken to the home of his family in Waterman Street. He cried out in the night, arousing several other artists in the building, and had manifested since then only alternations of unconsciousness and delirium. My uncle had once telephoned to the family, and from that time forward kept close watch of the case, calling often at the Thayer Street office of Dr. Toby, whom he learned to be in charge.
Your call, please.
Yes, operator. Get me Dr. Toby, Arkham 40098.
One moment, please. Ringing. Arkham 40098.
Hello?
Dr. Toby, Angel here. I'm calling to check in on the boy, Andrew Wilcox.
Nothing encouraging to report, I'm afraid, Professor. The youth's mind seems to be dwelling on strange things. He's always muttering about the dreams he described, but he seems more and more fixated on some thing. He speaks of it in terrified fragments only. He repeats, miles high.
Thing? What sort of thing?
From the pieces I can cobble together, it's a creature. He mutters. It's all very scattered. Wings, scales.
Icon.
I'm sorry?
He carved such a creature in an icon weeks ago, and his condition is deteriorating.
His temperature is high, but not greatly above normal. He seems overcome with lethargy. His whole condition seems more like a true fever than a mental disorder.
Thank you, Doctor.
Miles high. He's going to see me. I have to hide. No.
Andrew?
What? No. It's awake. He's awake.
Andrew?
In his house. Let him sleep. We have to let him. What have we done?
Andrew!
What have we done? No. To the ship!
Andrew!
Ah!
Andrew?
Mother, where am I? What?
On the afternoon of April 2nd, every trace of Wilcox's malady suddenly ceased. He sat upright in bed, astonished to find himself at home, and completely ignorant of what happened in dream or reality since the night of March 23rd. All traces of strange dreaming have vanished with his recovery.
What was stranger than young Andrew Wilcox's miraculous recovery was the correspondence my uncle soon received as a response to an ad. On a lark, he placed 2 lines of text in the classified section of the paper, seeking individuals with strange dreams of giants.
These dreams, which largely consist of slick dripping obelisks and strange carvings, began on the 23rd of March and continued every night for 11 days, at which point they ceased immediately and have not tormented me since.
They just keep coming.
The academics are useless. They fail so utterly in describing what they can't acutely label. I can hardly tell what they're describing.
We aren't all poets and artists like Mr. Wilcox. Some of us are useful.
Noted.
This original correspondence was not preserved, but his notes formed a thorough and significant digest. The salt of the earth types returned mostly negative results, though some experienced scattered impressions and images that matched the dates and figures in question. Scientific men were a little more affected, receiving fugitive glimpses of strange landscapes. In one case, a sense of abnormal dread was mentioned. It was from poets and artists that the most pertinent answers came, and I know that panic would have broken loose had they been able to compare notes.
During the period in question, my dreams became most vivid, almost indistinguishable from reality. With each dream, I lingered longer in this strange place with ooze and obelisk, dreading the looming giant, until at last I caught a glimpse of it. The monotonous chants, the strange symbols, though I could not translate or even transcribe them here, all stand as omens, warning signs of something terrible to come.
The final note told of a well-known architect with occult leanings who went violently insane on the date of young Wilcox's seizure and passed several months later.
Mr. Peabody spent his last hours screaming incessantly to be saved from some escaped denizen of the underworld. before collapsing into his bedding, overtaken by fever, and expiring. My God.
Had my uncle referred to these cases by names rather than numbers, I might have corroborated the accounts. The select few I was able to track down bore out the notes in full. I have often wondered if all the objects of the professor's questioning felt as puzzled as did this fraction. It is well that no explanation shall ever reach them.
God, help us.
The press cuttings in the file touched on cases of panic, mania, and eccentricity during this given period. Professor Angel must have employed a cutting bureau, for the number of extracts was tremendous to the sources scattered throughout the globe.
We were called to the scene on Belgrave Square around 2 a.m. to find the body. His butler had heard the screaming moments before he leapt from the window in his dressing gown.
A dispatch from California detailed a theosophist colony, donning red robes and waiting for a glorious fulfillment that never came. Voodoo rituals multiplied in Haiti. New York policemen were
mobbed by hysterical workmen on the night of March 22nd into the morning of the 23rd.
And reports of troubles from asylums around the world were so numerous that only a miracle could have stopped the medical fraternity from noting strange parallelisms and drawing mystified conclusions. A strange bunch of cuttings, all told. I can at this date scarcely recall the cold rationalism with which I set them aside. But I was then convinced that young Wilcox had known of the older matters mentioned by the professor.
Friends, I'd like to talk to you now about Master Scarcella's Taekwondo. Master Scarcella's world-class Taekwondo has been Birmingham's premier family martial arts center for more than 15 years. Master Justin Scarcella has been teaching Taekwondo for over 20 years, and his school has helped over 15,000 students become better equipped to handle the world with lessons learned on and off the mat. Taekwondo is not only great for fitness and stress relief, but it helps to develop focus, confidence, and self-defense skills. Our mission is to provide the highest quality martial arts instruction to empower our students with valuable skills for daily life and to contribute to a safe and peaceful community. Get in touch to learn about taking a free class. Give us a try with a no-pressure, no-cost introductory lesson. Master Scarcella's Taekwondo, empowering students to progress to their unique potential through Taekwondo. Cthulhu, more like Cthulhu. Go to alabamatkd.com.
The older matters which had made the sculptor's dream and bas relief so significant to my uncle formed the subject of the second half of the manuscript. Once before, Professor Angel had seen the nightmarish outlines of the nameless monstrosity, puzzled over unknown hieroglyphics, and heard the ominous syllables which can only be rendered as Cthulhu. The earlier sequence had happened 17 years before.
Where did you learn
A
that?
Macedonian law form based on ancient laws of Hammurabi.
I've never seen anything like it. These are the pyramid texts of...
Capron, the figure of the five-headed beast, is it mentioned in any of the myths?
None that I have read. Are we sure this isn't a forgery?
Excuse me, Professor Angel.
Yes.
Joan LaGrosse. I'm a consultant with the New Orleans Police. Do you have a moment?
You've come a long way, Miss LaGrosse.
Detective, if you will. Professor, your name keeps coming up as someone who might be able to help me.
If you'll excuse me.
Of course.
What can I help you with, Inspector?
This type of thing is not my purview. I was hoping you might shed some light on this. A raid 2 weeks ago disrupted what our best intelligence told us. This figurine was part of a satanic cult. It was not. I must tell you that I have never seen rites so dark from any group, not even the devil worshippers.
How so?
Human sacrifice, drownings. Sir, I must beg your discretion. If the general public knew what happened in the woods, panic would spread.
I have never seen anything like it, I'm afraid. The wings of a bat, the body of a man, the head of a cephalopod? It matches no god I have read about in myth, Western or otherwise.
So it's new?
I would think, but the markings are well worn. This is no fresh forgery.
Excuse me, I can't help but note the figurine. May I?
Ah, yes. Miss Skinner, you would know a forgery if anyone would.
Excuse me, where did you say this originated?
Louisiana.
Could it be native? Aren't the Atacapos cannibals?
Only if you believe the Choctaw. I've never seen a figure like it from any of the southeastern tribes. Many of the tribes practice solar worship. I don't see any of the traditional signs.
I cannot place it without my full array of equipment, but I will say this is very, very old.
How old?
Let me see.
This is Professor Channing Webb of Princeton.
Have you seen it?
It has been some time, nearly 50 years, but I will not forget it. I was in Greenland and Iceland seeking out answers to some runic inscriptions a colleague had unearthed when I came across it. The tribe that practices devil worship was isolated from the other Esquimaux. The other tribes shunned them, feared them, and would not or could not answer questions about their rituals. They practiced human sacrifice, and they had an idol such as this. I took a phonetic transcription from their elder priest, the best I could create in Roman letters. But I remember as well now as you might remember the name of a foreigner whose language is unfamiliar.
Benugli, Miglanaf, Cthulhu, Relay, Wignagel, Fatagan?
Yes, that's it.
What does it mean?
One of the men we arrested was chanting it. I asked him the same question.
I never learned an answer.
It means in his house at Relay, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming.
Relay?
What, pray tell, led the police to look into this cult? Was it a tip?
A woman came in, one of the lagoon people who squats out on swampland, baby in her arms. She told us a creature had been taking people, children. All they ever heard was drumming from the woods, never saw the thing. We sent an officer out and came back with reports of nearly a dozen missing persons. Naturally, we didn't believe there was a creature, but we sent 20 men out with 2 carriages and an automobile. Her husband guided us past the point where the roads were passable. Automobiles had to stop eventually as we got deeper into the muck and roots and Spanish moss. Right on past a crumbled rock wall, must have been built by French or Spanish settlers, and into a huddle of shacks. There was an iridescent fungus everywhere, and the place smelled like death. We heard the drums there, and shrieks that made the new recruits ask if we should turn back. Up ahead, there was a red glow flickering like firelight. Our guide refused to go further. He took off running back the way we came. So, 19 of us went forward. I tell you, there are noises that men make and noises that animals create. But the sounds we heard were neither. The scene was from the devil himself, a Hieronymus Bosch painting come to life, men and women hardly resembling humanity turned to their primal natures and howled, wailed, groaned. But they would stop, and there would be a moment of deafening silence before that chorus. Benugli, Miglanaf, Cthulhu, Relay, Wignagel, Fatagan. We were hypnotized with terror. There they were, braying, bellowing, dancing inside a ring of fire that cast its red light on a monolith at the center, nearly 8 feet tall in granite, and this figure on top of it. All around the circle were the bodies of women and children who had gone missing, nearly 100 of them carried on this bacchanal, between the ring of victims and the ring of fire.
What did you do?
It felt like aeons, but it was likely only a minute before our senses and our sense of duty returned to us. We charged that horde, whistles blowing, guns raised, and when it was all over, we had 47 prisoners in custody. We marched them to the jailhouse, back through our swampy trail. 5 of the worshipers were dead from the confrontation, and we made their fellows carry them on stretchers. And I took this, carefully removed it, and claimed it as evidence. Few will talk to us, but those that will insist that they are not practitioners of witchcraft or satanic rituals. They claim to worship the great old ones. When asked about their doctrine, they say their only text is the dreams of the first men. And even when put to extreme interrogation to learn of their leaders or their origins, all they would say was that someday, when the stars are ready, the cult would liberate him.
Him?
Old Fabian, we think he was their leader, would only say him. Only 2 of the cultists were found sane enough to be executed, and Fabian was not one of them. The rest we divided up into various institutions. They all denied the ritual murders, claimed the black winged ones were to blame. Fabian claimed to sail strange ports and talk with undying cult leaders in the mountains of China. He talked of a time when other things ruled the earth, and they had great cities. They had all died long before man, he said. He said they were not made of flesh and blood, but had shape.
As this idol would indicate.
They no longer lived, but cannot die. And they dwell, he said, in the city of Relay, preserved by sunspell and waiting. And it was Cthulhu that had preserved them. Unable to move first, he said, they wait and speak with thought. I asked him who had made the idol, and he said that the first man had carved them in the images the great old ones had showed them.
I've never heard anything like this cult.
Nor have I.
Where is this relay supposed to be?
Fabian said it had sunken deep beneath the sea, but he believed if they could revive Cthulhu, they would be rewarded with a time beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside, and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy.
How grotesque.
He made a brief mention of a book, the Necronomicon of Alhazred, and then he stopped talking abruptly and refused to say more. I asked him about the size of the great old ones, but he had shut himself off.
Abdul al-Hazred, the mad Arab.
You know it?
That is not dead, which can eternal lie.
And the strange youngs, even death may die.
It is a well-known couplet and a very strange text.
I asked every professor I could reach at Tulane, but they did not know it.
The only copy that exists in America is in the collection at the Miskatonic University in Markham, Massachusetts.
The role of the idol as evidence in a murder trial was over, and so Professor Webb borrowed the icon for some time. It was returned to LaGrasse after Webb's death. My uncle's notes remarked on how strikingly similar it was to young Wilcox's sculpture. I understood now why the tale had so excited my uncle, for Wilcox had dreamed the exact figure and inscription from both the swamp and the Greenland devil cult. Though I privately suspected young Wilcox had heard of the cult in some way, I understood my uncle's vexation. There was clearly a rational explanation, but what if? I determined that this was a con put on by a bored university student and sent a strong rebuke by post to young Wilcox. But the subject of the cult still remained to fascinate me, and once while traveling near New Orleans, I stopped to speak with Inspector LaGrasse. Old Fabian, unfortunately, had been dead for some years, and while a healthy skepticism remained, I wondered at times if my uncle's mysterious death was far from natural. As events have progressed, and I have learned of the seamen who saw things and died, I have become more certain of this fact. I think Professor Angel died because he knew too much, or rather because he was likely to learn too much. Whether I shall go as he did remains to be seen, for I have learned much now.
Land ho!
I had largely given over my inquiries into what Professor Angel called the Cthulhu cult, and was visiting a learned friend in New Jersey when I stumbled across a clipping on his desk from the Sydney Bulletin. The picture caught my eye. A half-tone cut of a hideous stone image, almost identical to the one LaGrasse found in the swamp. I was disappointed to find that it was only of moderate length.
Mystery derelict found at sea. Vigilant arrives with helpless armed New Zealand yacht in tow. One survivor and a dead man found aboard. Tale of desperate battle in deaths at sea. Rescued seaman refuses particulars of strange experience. Odd idol found in his possession. Inquiry to follow.
The Morris and Company's freighter, Vigilant, bound from Valparaiso, arrived this morning at its wharf in Darling Harbor, having in tow the battled and disabled but heavily armed steam yacht Alert of Dunedin, New Zealand, which was sighted April 12th with one living and one dead man aboard.
The Vigilant left Valparaiso on March the 25th, and on April 2nd was driven considerably south of her course by exceptionally heavy storms and waves. On April 12th, the derelict was sighted and appeared deserted. The body on board had been dead for a week, and the lone survivor was found clutching a stone idol of unknown origins. This man, after recovering his senses, told an exceedingly strange story of piracy and slaughter.
Their ship, the Emma, was thrown off her course by an earthquake and a great storm on March 1st, and it was 3 weeks later, sailing in open waters, supplies running low, that they encountered another ship, the Alert.
Captain, there's a ship hailing us from the port side.
We're so off course, encountering anyone is a blessing right now.
They're signaling us to turn back.
Turn back? Turn back where? We don't know where we are.
They refused to turn back, and the Alert began to fire on them. The Emma pulled up alongside their attackers as the ship took on water, and then 11 or so men on board were forced to fight and kill the savage crew of the Alert.
The remaining men under Second Mate Johansen proceeded to explore the captured yacht, their own ship sunken. There, Johansen, found on board, found the stone idol. Together they continued in their original direction to see if the warning to turn back was for a particular reason, and the next day they raised sail and landed on a small island, though none was known to exist in that part of the ocean. 6 of the remaining men somehow died ashore, though Johansen was reticent about this part of the story and only said that they fell in some rock or chasm. By the time he returned to the yacht, he had only one companion. Together they could not manage the oncoming storm, and Johansen could not recall how his last companion, William Bryden, had died. The coroner inspecting the body at the ship's return revealed no apparent cause of death. Neighbors and friends of Johansen note that he has an excellent reputation as a sober and worthy man. An inquiry will begin tomorrow.
That was all, together with a picture of the infernal icon. The dates matched so perfectly with my great-uncle's findings. March 1st, or February 28th, according to the international dateline, the earthquake and the storm. On the same night across the globe, artists and poets around the world began to dream of a strange cyclopean city, and young Wilcox carves the disturbing relief in his sleep. March 23rd, the Emma lands on a mysterious island, and on the same night, Wilcox slips into a delirium, and by all accounts, the others that were dreaming experienced a sudden increase in the horror and vividness of their dreams. But what of April 2nd, when all the dreams ceased? The day that Wilcox emerged from a fit of terror, unharmed.
How are you?
So I traveled to Sydney.
Blasted
Taxi.
engine's gone dead.
Miss, the Hyde Park Museum, please.
I must admit, when I received your letter last month, this artifact seemed uninteresting to me, though my colleagues in the archaeology department have their own fascination with it. But I have a chance to examine it now. You say there is another like it in New Orleans.
I have not seen it myself, but I have seen photographs, and the two are remarkably similar.
I would be eager to get my hands on it. This idol. You must understand, miss.
Please, call me Charlotte.
Charlotte, you must understand that I am one of the most prominent geologists living. So when I say this, it is not merely an experience. I have never seen this material in my life. I have run tests and called in colleagues. I cannot say from what it is made or how it was even carved. There's no other rock like it on earth.
How queer.
What is it?
The idol in New Orleans, the one the police confiscated as part of their investigation. When they asked about where it had come from, the man accused said they had come from the stars, and they had brought their images with them.
Had I not seen it myself, I might laugh at the idea. But having held the unsettling object, I must admit, it seems just as plausible an explanation as any.
Now, on a more serious note, we'd like to thank our sponsors at the Cremation Center of Birmingham. The fine folks at the Cremation Center of Birmingham are here to help families through the difficult experience of dealing with the death of a loved one. Grieving families need help, guidance, and service, and that is exactly what Cremation Center of Birmingham is here to provide. Their services are customized to meet your specific needs. If you want to take the stress and rush out of making funeral arrangements, pre-planning is a great option. Funerals may be held just a few short days after passing. Pre-planning gives your family a little more time to try to adjust to your loss and allows them to stay focused on honoring you with a proper send-off. Take advantage of their professional cremation services. The Cremation Center of Birmingham is available 24/7 to answer your questions.
Shaken with such a mental revolution as I had never before known, I now resolved to visit Maid Johansson in Oslo.
Hello?
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm looking for Gustav Johansson.
He is dead. Who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. My name is Charlotte Thurston. I've been tracking the story of the Emma.
Oh, no. Sorry. Goodbye.
I think it has something to do with the death of my great-uncle.
Come inside.
Mrs. Johansson spoke very poor English, but a neighbor was able to come translate for us. Gustav Johansson had told her no more than he had told the public, but had left a long manuscript of technical matters, as he said, written in English, evidently in order to safeguard her from the peril of casual perusal. When asked of her husband's death, Mrs. Johansson broke into tears. The story was conveyed to me instead by the neighbor, who knew of the tale as it had been the topic of popular conversation at the time.
He was walking near the Gothenburg dock through a narrow lane when a bundle of papers fell from a window. 2 sailors, Lascar crewmen from an English ship that was docked nearby, helped him to his feet. They called for an ambulance, but by the time it arrived, he was dead. The physicians could not find any injury. The doctor who wrote the death certificate said his heart was weak. He died of shock.
I was reeling from the similarities to my uncle's death, and I pleaded with Mrs. Johansson to let me have the manuscript. She eventually agreed, and I read the thing from cover to cover twice on my voyage back to London. It was a simple, rambling thing, a naive sailor's effort at a post facto diary, and strove to recall day by day that last awful voyage. I cannot attempt to transcribe it verbatim in all its cloudiness and redundance, but I will tell its gist, enough to show why the sound of the water against the vessel's sides became so unendurable to me that I stopped my ears with cotton.
Turn back!
Turn back? Turn back where? We don't know where we are!
Sir, they're raising another flag.
Proceed onward. That storm threw us all off course. If we don't find our way soon, we'll be eating each other for breakfast.
They're firing at us.
Have they gone mad? Have they been taken by pirates?
Sir, what do we do?
Ready the weapons. Prepare to board.
Of the cult fiends on the alert, he speaks with significant horror. There was some peculiarly abominable quality about them, which made their destruction seem almost a duty. When the investigators later questioned the ruthlessness with which the crew appeared to have been murdered, Johansen showed a kind of wonder at the charge. Their captain lost in this action. Johansen took command of the Emma and continued on towards a stone pillar showing over the horizon. The structure of the alert seemed to be guarding from their approach.
Signore, there's an island ahead, south latitude 47 degrees, 9 minutes west, longitude 126 degrees, 43 minutes.
Yes, I see it.
There's nothing here on the charts.
Is that a city?
Oh, Dio. It is.
Gather a landing party. We need to look for food and water.
Si, signore.
The city Johansen describes seems to be out of a nightmare. The coastline of the island, a tangle of mud, ooze, and cyclopean masonry. The blocks that comprise its architecture seem too big to be moved there by man, and the angles and brutal stone surfaces seem to be a description of a futurist painting from someone who would not know the art form if looking upon it. The nightmare corpse city of Raleigh, that was built in measureless aeons behind history by the vast, loathsome shapes that seeped down from the dark stars.
It's as if the whole city has risen from the ocean. Look at the slime, the algae, the barnacles on every surface.
I thought that was a mountain where we are far off, but now I think...
Like an Egyptian tomb.
These aren't like any hieroglyphics I've ever seen before.
He did his best without the education or experience necessary to describe this indescribable place, and by every account, it matched the city that Wilcox had traveled in his dreams, with its monumental statue featuring the same figure on the bas-relief. The angles Johansen described with incredulity reminded me of something Wilcox had once said to my great-uncle, that the geometry of the dream place he saw was abnormal, non-Euclidean, and loathsomely suggestive of spheres and dimensions apart from ours. Now, an unlettered seaman felt the same thing, whilst gazing at that terrible reality.
Proceed with caution, men. The rocks already look slick, and it looks like it may rain.
Have you ever seen a storm cloud like that?
We're not going to find any food here. This place smells like death.
Let's find some evidence of this place and get back to the ship quickly. Something we can carry. I don't want to be here any longer than necessary.
The men searched, each becoming more overcome with terror than the next, until they were hopelessly lost within the strange geometry of the island. They would approach a structure that, at the distance, seemed concave, only to discover convexity upon approach. As the search went on and time distorted, fear gripped them in such a hold that each man would have fled if not for fear of being ridiculed by the others. It was only half-heartedly that they searched, vainly as it proved, for some portable souvenir to bear away.
I'm going up there.
To the monolith?
Be careful. Watch your footing.
He seems so far away already, and yet he just left.
There's a door up here.
Follow him.
Me?
We'll go together. They're like barn doors.
Is it a door? How does it open? There's no handle.
There's a lintel and a frame.
It's like one of those storm doors.
Those are slanted.
This is slanted.
No, it's flat, like a trap.
You're clearly out of
Look
your...
at the horizon. This door is flat.
Look at the shore. It's
There's no handle. It is so big.
opening. Can you see anything?
It's so black it hurts my eyes.
I can't even see the walls of the tunnel.
Is it a tunnel?
What else would it be?
Get back!
The smell!
Don't breathe it in. Keep back.
Wait! I see it!
The odor arising from the newly opened depths was intolerable, and at length men thought they heard a nasty, slopping sound down there. Everyone listened, and everyone was listening still when it lumbered slobberingly into sight and gropingly squeezed its gelatinous green immensity through the black doorway into the tainted outside air of that poisoned city of madness. Poor Johansen's handwriting almost gave out when he wrote of this. Of the 6 men who never reached the ship, he thinks 2 perished of pure fright in that accursed instant. The thing cannot be described. There is no language for such eldritch contradictions of all matter, force, and cosmic order.
Run! Back to the ship!
The thing of the idols, the green, sticky spawn of the stars, had awaked to claim its own. The stars were right again, and what an age-old cult had failed to do by design, a band of innocent sailors had done by accident. After vigintillions of years, great Cthulhu was loose again, and ravening for delight.
To the ship!
3 men were swept up by the flabby claws before anybody turned. God rest them if there be any rest in the universe. Parker slipped as the other 3 were plunging frenziedly over endless vistas of green-crusted rock to the boat. And Johansen swears he was swallowed up by an angle of masonry which shouldn't have been there, an angle which was acute, but behaved as if it were obtuse. So only Bryden and Johansen reached the rowboat, and pulled desperately for the ship. The mountainous monstrosity flopped down the slimy stones and hesitated, floundering at the edge of the water.
Starts the engine.
She's still hot.
How? It's been hours.
Steam had not been suffered to go down entirely, despite the departure of all hands for the shore. And it was the work of only a few moments of feverish rushing up and down between wheel and engines to get the alert underway. Slowly, amidst the distorted horrors of that indescribable scene, she began to churn the lethal waters. Whilst on the masonry of that charnel shore that was not of earth, the Titan thing from the stars slavered and givered like Polypheme cursing the fleeing ship of Odysseus. Then, bolder than the storied Cyclops, great Cthulhu slid greasily into the water and began to pursue with vast wave-raising strokes of cosmic potency.
Breeden, what are you doing?
Breeden looked back and went mad, laughing shrilly as he kept on laughing at intervals till death found him one night in the cabin, whilst Johansen was wandering deliriously. But Johansen had not given out yet. Knowing that the thing could surely overtake the alert until steam was fully up, he resolved on a desperate chance, and setting the engine for full speed, ran lightning-like on deck and reversed the wheel. The brave Norwegian drove his vessel head-on against the pursuing jelly, which rose above the unclean froth like the stern of a demon galleon. The awful squid head with writhing feelers came nearly up to the bowsprit of the sturdy yacht, but Johansen drove on relentlessly. There was a grotesque bursting sound, a stench as of 1,000 open graves, and a deluge of slime and other material that the chronicler would not describe on paper. For an instant, the ship was befouled by an acrid and blinding green cloud, and then there was only a venomous seething astern, where, God in heaven, the scattered plasticity of that nameless sky spawn was nebulously recombining in its hateful original form, whilst its distance widened every second as the alert gained momentum from its mounting steam.
Captain's log. This day begins with cloudy weather at 1300 hours. No sight of any other ship or land. I have spent my time pondering over this strange idol that Breeden had in hand when he began his fits of laughter. His laughter ceased last night. I found him dead at 2000 yesterday. I have been adrift, with no fuel or, frankly, any desire to try and navigate. It is enough to be far away from that accursed place. Another storm approaches.
Then came the storm of April 2nd, and a gathering of the clouds about his consciousness. There is a sense of spectral whirling through liquid gulfs of infinity, of dizzying rides through reeling universes on a comet's tail, and of hysterical plunges from the pit to the moon and from the moon back again to the pit, all livened by a caconated chorus of the distorted, hilarious elder gods and the green, bat-winged, mocking imps of Tartarus. Out of that dream came rescue, the vigilant.
If I told them the truth of what happened, they would think me mad. I cannot even tell my wife. And so I write this account as a way of leaving my story for others to find. Or, perhaps, I will destroy this before I die, so that no other is burdened with what I have seen. Death would be a boon if only it could blot out some memories.
That was the document I read, and now I have placed it in the tin box beside the bas-relief and the papers of Professor Angel. With it shall go this record of mine, this test of my own sanity, wherein is pieced together that which I hope may never be pieced together again. I have looked upon all that the universe has to hold of horror, and now forever afterward, the skies of spring and the flowers of summer must ever afterward be poison to me. But I do not think my life will be long. As my uncle went, as poor Johansen went, so I shall go. I know too much, and the cult still lives. Cthulhu still lives too, I suppose, again in that chasm of stone which has shielded him since the sun was young. His accursed city is sunken once more, for the Vigilant sailed over the spot after the April storm. But his ministers on earth still bellow and prance and slay around idol-capped monoliths in lonely places. He must have been trapped by the sinking whilst within his black abyss, or else the world would by now be screaming with fright and frenzy. Who knows the end? What has risen may sink, and what has sunk may rise. Loathsomeness waits and dreams in the deep, and decay spreads over the tottering cities of men. A time will come, but I must not and cannot think. Let me pray that, if I do not survive this manuscript, my executors may put caution before audacity and see that it meets no other eye.